Thank you, Pam, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the Launceston function today. And for those people watching online from their homes, from their workplaces or from their ute, I hope you enjoy today's presentation. My apologies, not all of the material appears to be sort of fitting on our screen in Launceston, but that's okay. As John alluded earlier, there are millions of people in Australia living with depression and anxiety, and 1 in 5 people experience mental health disorder in the last 12 months. And normally when I provide that sort of statistic, people look around the tables and think, well, which one of us is it today? So what I encourage you to do is to think about people that are at your kitchen table. It could be the next door neighbour's kid, it could be the next door neighbour, any people that you interact with in terms of the social groups, the sporting groups, the friends groups, the Facebook groups that you interact with, and think about 1 in 5 in terms of those people that you interact with and the level of support and care that you can provide one another. The reason I enjoy coming to Tasmania, and Pam and I met last year when I was presenting at a conference up north on what they describe as the mainland, but we know the mainland's here. And I made the comment, if you wanted to find the best research in collaboration, support and care for people, forget the eastern coast of Australia, focus on Western Australia and focus on Tasmania. Because they're communities that are actively working together, collaborating together, sharing information together to care for those people that work in the communities. And people were stunned. Pam did cheer, and so I knew one person in the room came from Tasmania, and the others were quite shocked because, to be blunt, they struggle to work together. In Tasmania, what I enjoy doing, and coming to Tasmania now for many decades, is the ability to work with people cross-industry, cross-business, corporate, remote, regional, rural, everyone wants to work together. And I'm hopeful that, as John is, that we can take the messages from today's presentations and translate them into practical action on the job, in the farm, on the workplace, to actually benefit others. People in, and I'm going to present you, amongst other things, I'm a public accountant. Please don't tell anyone that. But I tend to work with facts and data. And I'm going to present to you some research. Any of the views that I present today are not my views. My views don't really count. What I do is harvest the best of research worldwide and couple it together to the benefit of others. But some of these statistics that I take you through, whilst I'm a person that likes numbers, I don't like the numbers that I'm going to show you because it shows the impact of mental illness in rural communities, and it's quite shocking. There's a greater prevalence of chronic conditions and disability in rural areas. There's generally poorer health and higher rates of smoking and other general health issues. There tends to be more risky drinking and illicit drug use, and that tends to be higher in rural communities. Lower incomes and less financial security, and as we know, a greater exposure and vulnerability to natural disasters. For those that are taking notes, you'll get a copy of the presentation material at the end of this webinar, and each slide has evidence-based research at the bottom and a source. So if you need to find more information about what we discussed today, you'll know where to find it, you'll know how to retrieve the information if you need it. When you look at rural health and mental health research, a number of things are highlighted. There's a sense of pessimism about future prospects, higher levels of unemployment, loneliness and loss of relationships, higher use of alcohol and other drugs, they certainly add to the problem, and the pressure to conform to locally acceptable patterns of behaviour. I come from the bush. I'm in a suit today, but I'm normally in bush clothes, a bit like John and Rhonda and others in the room. And where I grew up in the bush, if you wore anything other than Levi's, there was something wrong with you, definitely something wrong with you. And if you wore moleskins, well, you were uppity, and that was a problem too. So the pressures to conform in my community, just around the type of jeans that you wore, were really high, let alone the choices that young people have to confront in the community in which they work, live, and have gone to school. particularly around issues of same-sex preferences and a whole host of other choices that people have where they struggle to be themselves in a place that perhaps works against difference. Does that make sense and resonate with people? Young people really struggle in some communities, particularly rural communities. Here's the statistics that I promised to share with you, and you can see, as I said, they're quite alarming numbers. And if you go from left to right, which starts with major cities all the way across to outer regional, remote rural and very remote rural, you can see how the numbers escalate for both male, female and people generally. The rate of suicide in rural areas is roughly 40% higher than in major cities. So we're working with a rural crisis here, aren't we? And these are quite damning statistics that most people in Australia don't know. One of the big issues, and these statistics relate to the amount of time spent in healthcare. And once again, if you track from major cities on the left across to outer regional and remote on the right, you can see how the mental health disorders and intentional self-harm increase significantly as you move further away from access to resources and support. One of the big issues, and the conclusion reached from this piece of research, is that timely diagnosis, treatment and ongoing management of mental health conditions in rural and remote areas happens later, or is more likely not to occur. And as John highlighted in his presentation, the conditions that we talk about are treatable. If people seek help, if people seek support, they start to recover and they can live full and meaningful and rich lives. But the issue is encouraging that self-help and self-helping type behaviour that tends to be lacking for people in the bush. Does that resonate with people around the room? I see a lot of nodding heads. People in the bush struggle through no fault of their own, and you'll hear me say that a lot today, and John highlighted it quite well. People don't go looking for mental illness. It strikes them down when they least expect it. And so what we'll be talking about today is some of the issues that we can manage in communities to help one another and provide support for one another. Here's another statistic, and this gives you the burden of illness by age, and it's broken down in male and female, and you can see from these statistics how younger people are struck down by these sorts of conditions, and that particularly in the burden of illness, before the age of 25, people can really struggle with these conditions and not know that they have a condition. They just woke up one morning and felt different to others on their Facebook. Everyone else on their Facebook group seems to be happy and are doing wonderful things, but they feel perhaps under a cloud and could be struggling. And you can see that it strikes people down in their prime working life. For people that work in workplaces, 78% of those people don't seek treatment. So let's talk some numbers again. If we've got a community of 500 people, of that 500 people, 100 could be struggling. 78 of those 100 people will not seek any treatment, when, as John outlined, we know that if people do seek treatment, they start to recover, they become well. And these conditions are treatable. So one of the key issues that I'm going to leave with you today, the key message, is try and encourage people to seek help and provide them the support to seek clinical professional help to manage the conditions that they may be suffering from. People with mental illness tend to occur most in prime working years, as we've seen. For those that work in workplaces of 10 or more, it can become a big burden for co-workers and supervisors, particularly if the person feels that in providing the support and providing care, people aren't getting their act together. They're not trying to help themselves. And certainly in the workplaces that I work around the community, I've been in agricultural communities over the last month in Mildura, Wentworth, Dareton, Darwin and Cape York, and I've seen the same sort of repeated issues where people that are trying to provide support to others can really struggle in maintaining that support. It starts to wear them out and they start to resent the person or get angry at the person because they just can't seem to get their act together. So providing the right level of support, as RAW do and Mental Health First Aid do, can give people more help seeking and help supporting and caring skills. It gives people a higher level of skill to care for others and remove some of that burden. There are a number of programs around, a number of employers, and we have a number of employers in the top end of Tasmania that have these programs in place: workplace chaplaincy, employee assistance programs, Are You OK, and other initiatives, and also online access to resources, and I'll take you through some of those during the day. But for those that are on farms and scattered around dairy farms and growing potatoes and other things, there isn't access to that level of knowledge and that level of support. They may not know where to go to find support, and we'll cover some of those issues today. The Are You OK program. Put your hand up if you've seen of the or heard of the Are You OK program now. Well, that's great. When I started wearing this badge many years ago, people used to pull me up in all sorts of places and say, "What does RUOP stand for?" Whereas now, 8 years on, everyone, 1 in 4 Australians know what Are You OK means and know how to manage the Are You OK program. Predominantly, it's very simple, and it's the question sometimes we choose not to ask or feel uncomfortable asking, is how can I help you? And it's a simple set of words. Grade 7 English. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to be a clinician to ask that simple question. And a number of questions can flow from that first question. Have you spoken to anyone about this? How do you think you can resolve the situation? What help do you need to actually manage the load? They're all caring questions and non-judgmental questions. Not everyone wants to hear those questions. So you will bump into some people that tell you to, in bush speak, to bugger off. You know, I'm fine. In fact, what's the matter with you? Why are you asking me these stupid questions? Because sometimes other people can see that they're not okay, but people can't see it themselves. So if you get someone that pushes back, I'm always here for you. If you want to chat, you can catch up with me anywhere, anytime. It's okay. I don't care whether if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Pick up the phone, give me a call. You know, I'm available for you and I'm here to support you. So in other words, people will come when they're ready. I think the important thing is to check in to people. I certainly see people that have major events that occur in their personal lives or in their community lives, where people are struck down by illness, injury, and they struggle, but time passes. So there could be a lot of support in day 1, week 1, week 2, but week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 8 marches on. People go back, those that were providing support could go back to their, life takes over. They go back to managing their own life, their own families, their own issues. And the person at week 6 or week 8 could feel alone, where there was 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago a lot of support. They may feel isolated and alone. So the key to it is check in with people. Check in at week 8, week 10, week 12, week 14. Just keep circling back to ensure that the person that perhaps is going through the grieving process or better managing their health has that felt support around them, that if they do need to reach out, they do need care, it's there for them when they need it. We're running a targeted campaign. I'll talk a little bit about that. And what we find is not a lot of people know how to provide this level of help and support when they need it, and people feel comfortable. They want to provide help, but they're just not sure how, and they're not sure how it's going to be received. Yet we know, and John's presentation highlighted, providing people support, providing people the care gives the person hope, and hope that they can seek treatment, hope that they can recover from these conditions, which are all treatable, and hope for a newer and different and brighter future. The Mental Health First Aid program comes in very valuable when you ask someone, are they okay? And they say the thing that perhaps you don't want to hear, they're not okay. It provides you with the skills and the ability, and John and Rhonda and others around Tasmania and myself come to Tasmania to promote these programs and train people in these areas, to provide people with the necessary skills to respond when a person's struggling. What are the things that we cover? Mental health issues in Australia, Mental Health First Aid Action Plan, depression, anxiety, psychosis, substance use problems, and how to deal with mental health crises. So if a person has suicide ideation, they're suffering from panic attacks, they're dealing with some sort of psychosis, or they could be dealing with some sort of drug-induced psychosis or concern, people have the skills to be able to manage that. Put your hand up if you've got a first aid certificate in the room. Yeah, a couple of hands go up. So if I said to you that I had diabetes and if I started to slow down, which is hard to imagine during this presentation, would you know what to do? Probably give me a lolly, give me a can of Coke or something to sort of keep me going. If I passed out on the floor and you weren't sure whether it was a stroke or a cardiac arrest or whatever, would you know what to do? Yep. So the training program, the mental health training program, gives you the ability to provide support and care for a person that could be struggling with a chronic condition like depression, anxiety or substance abuse, or what to do if the person is in a crisis, if they are thinking, having thoughts of harming themselves or harming others, or if they're struggling with one of the other problems, panic attacks or psychosis that I mentioned earlier. You've then got the skills. You can be confident stepping up and caring for that person until professional care can arrive to provide the clinical support needed for that person, like any other first aid program. It's written in grade 7 English, it's easily understood, and more importantly, we have programs that teach people face to face on how to develop those skills and how to apply them if they need it, whether that be at work, whether it be at home, or whether it be in the general public. You could walk into Safeway one day and see a person have a panic attack. It could happen anywhere, it could happen any time, but you'll have the skills to be able to manage it. Why is it successful? There is a high level of stigma and discrimination. Pam talked about that in the introduction. People may not realise they need help or that professional help is always available. What we do know is that mental health first aid training results in better knowledge, attitude and help giving. And as John highlighted, and if you catch up with Rhonda during the next break, they'll tell you the helper's actions determine how quickly the person seeks help and ultimately recovers. You'll get to learn about medical treatments, psychological treatments, lifestyle, complementary changes, support groups, rehab programs, and how family and friends can provide support. Because as John highlighted, when people are struggling, they can disconnect themselves from family and friends. Now, when I say family in the broadest context. Not everyone has a loving, caring family, but they have people around them that care and support them. So how to reconnect those people rather than retreat and isolate themselves from those supports. You'll get to know what professionals can do. So you'll know more about this than Jack or Jill public do. What general practitioners, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health nurses, social workers, counsellors, what they do, what their qualifications are, and how you can access them in the community. These are life skills, folks, that most people don't know and never are aware of until a crisis hits their kitchen table. We have a bit like if I collapsed on the floor and the first aider came forward, what would you think about? Would you think about doctors A, B, C, D and start to go through that little checklist of, danger, he hasn't electrocuted himself with all these cables down here that are safely laid by WorkSafe Tasmania, by the way, Pam. And you'd start to go through a response, airways, breathing, circulation, all of those sorts of things. For mental health first aid, we have the same sort of methodology. It's a cue to prompt you what to do and how to do it, called ALGE, how to approach, how to assess, and how to assist people with crisis, how to listen non-judgmentally, which is really hard to do, because you're not sure what people are going to say when you ask them, are they okay? How to give support and information, and how to encourage people to access professional help, and how to reconnect with family and friends that can be of great support to them. We have a whole range of evidence-based guidelines. If you go to the mental health first aid website, they're one-page fact sheets on all sorts of things, from eating disorders to managing the elderly, whether you I've worked in residential aged care and community aged care in Devonport for many years. There's programs around eating disorders, psychosis, substance abuse, all of them grade 7 English, easily understood, talk about the signs, symptoms, where to seek professional help, where to get other information, where to get other supports and websites that could be useful if people need it, all on a single piece of paper to make it easier that if people need information, it can be provided to them quickly and effectively. We've developed innovative programs, and our company is partnering with New Farm. We tend to partner with the best in any industry, normally a single player in industry like New Farm, to raise awareness in rural communities to provide early intervention. So I worked with New Farm a couple of weeks ago, and their salespeople and their agronomists and teams go onto farms all the time, and they're bumping into people in high levels of stress and high levels of anxiety. So we've started piloting a program to upskill those people. If they do come to a farm, if they do find people in trouble, they then know what to do and how to do it to encourage those people to actually seek support. Whereas at the moment they've bumped into people that they can see struggling, but they're just not sure. Now they will be sure. New Farm workers are being trained to encourage those at risk to seek help and encourage appropriate professional support. And we undertake research together to look at innovations, and I'll take you through some of those, including developing online digital platforms to share community resources. 30 years ago when I started this journey, and it came from living in the bush and seeing people at kitchen tables struggle. My family was okay, my family was good, but I saw other families, neighbours, people in the bush that were struggling. So that's what kicked off this journey for me 30 years ago. Back then we didn't have digital technology, we didn't have ways of reaching people in remote communities. Now we do, and I'm seeing a great benefit that people can derive from having access to information they could never see, they never knew. They'd only receive things word of mouth, and back 30 years ago this was an issue that was almost an undiscussable. Research is underway to look at widespread awareness campaigns and programs that people can access to address their psychological health concerns. We use a community online platform, it's called eWorkbox, and what that does is produce a lot of information in a place so people can easily find it. We create resource directories around physical wellbeing, psychological wellbeing and financial wellbeing. Big issues in the community, but certainly big issues in rural health. And it provides information. This information's vetted. It's normally from government sources. It's available, but people don't know where to find it. We bring it together in one spot and use an eWorkbox platform to then provide it to tablets, iPads, iPhones, Androids, whatever works. We review third-party providers of psychological services to ensure adherence to evidence-based practices. That's a longhand way of saying we focus on things that work, that are validated by Beyond Blue, Black Dog or other institutions that we know work, and we actively promote them via this platform. And I think another key point that John, and if you catch up with Rhonda you'll hear the same, is providing peer support for rural workers focused on mental health issues and encouraging that worker to worker and farm worker to farm worker relationship and upskilling. People like to work and listen to people that they like, so our approach and Raw's approach is really to upskill those people because they care anyway. They're there because they're caring people. What it does is give them a high level of skill to be more effective carers and take some of that stress away of not knowing. We have a different product called Raw, and Raw, which was created by the University of New South Wales and supported by the Black Dog Institute. It's an online program, and what RAW stands for in this context is around resilience and wellbeing. It's evidence-based e-learning program. It enables people, and John gave us some insight around how your brain works and the changes that go through the brain at different stages of life, and how to equip yourself with skills, particularly around psychological resilience and coping strategies that can help you better understand how to manage those issues in terms of mindfulness and audio exercises that can give a range of coping strategies. There's an expert curated library of resources, so if people do need more information on particular areas, they can dive into greater detail around those sorts of things, and people are provided with regular newsletters and expert advice. And once again, this is in the presentation, and what I wanted to do is give you some practical products that you could actually have a look at and work with, and the Royal Mind Coaching Group has discounted that for anyone on this webinar today or anyone in this room. Beyond Blue have a range of free apps that are worth mentioning, and John and I were talking about this before we presented today. Beyond Blue have an app called Beyond Now, and it's a safety planning app for those people that could be struggling and how to get them through those tough moments, particularly if they're isolated and by themselves. And it's an app that can be downloaded on iPhones, and or it can be printed in a safety plan that can be kept in the glove box. It's something that can be provided to other people that care for people that could be struggling with mental illness. It's part of an overall mental health and wellbeing safety strategy. The app helps creates a structured plan, ideally with the support of a health professional, so people have a plan before they hit a crisis, rather than afterwards and try and sort it out, or be overwhelmed by negative thoughts and not know what to do. The negative thoughts keep coming. At least when people have this safety plan available, when those thoughts come, they can open the glove box, pull out the piece of paper, have a read. It's very simple and easy to use. Or look at their phone and think, there's a lot to live for. There's a lot of people that care for me. In fact, I should contact one of those people now and provide that level of support. Whilst everyone's plan is unique to them, and I've spoken to a couple of people in the room today that have developed these plans for loved ones, it prompts people to work through steps that keep them safe until support can come. The safety plan really moves people through a range of coping strategies and also lists each person that can contact for support, their friends, their family and health professionals. And those people can have a copy of the plan. And it's a declaration of support by the individual, so that others that can respond, if they get a call and the person's struggling, they then have a sense of what to do and what's best to care for the individual that could be struggling. It's available on iPad, smartphone. We're developing targeted campaigns, so we tend to work with communities that are at risk. So I work in, I was a Vice President of BHP Billiton for many years, so I've worked in mining, oil, gas, utilities, and also agriculture and healthcare. So we have campaigns that we use actively in those communities, and we're finding that communities at risk really need a new and different and collaborative level of support where we can work together to actually provide support for people when they need it. In summary, I think the key is implementing face-to-face and online training that builds awareness, develop support and focus on increasing help-seeking behaviour. If you can encourage people to seek help from others, go to their GP, catch up with John, Rhonda, others, catch up with a mental health first aid officer, catch up with a local community nurse, they'll be steered towards the right level of clinical care and the right level of support. And we know as soon as people start to seek help, as soon as people start to receive the clinical care that they need when they need it, they start to recover and have much brighter futures. I think developing ongoing digital platforms that deliver communities of practice with global reach, not only within Tasmania but beyond Tasmania, is really important, because then you can have the best of knowledge from around the world streamed to people when and if they need it. And I think the collaborative approach of Tasmania sets the standard for the rest of the world, and provides support services that are 24/7 that reduce stigma and address mental health literacy. My big reflection, having worked in this sort of area for the last 30 years, is really in the bottom bullet point on this slide. Why do people choose not to seek help? Because they're struggling, and at times they may feel ashamed of that struggle. They have nothing to be ashamed of. And most people are afraid to raise mental health issues because most feel we won't be supportive and can't help. I think that's something that we need to change as a community and learn to more effectively care for one another, for those that are in need when they need it. And if you're concerned about someone, simply ask them, are you okay? Are You OK Day is coming up on the 14th of September in a couple of weeks. So the question I put to you, both in this room and on this webinar, is who would you ask? Are they okay? Resources are available. There's a list of those there. They'll be at the back of this presentation when you receive it. Seek the help and the support that you need to care for others that are going through change, through as John rightly pointed out, through no fault of their own. And I wish all in this room and on this webinar the best of mental health moving forward for those that are here, and for more importantly, those that you care for in the communities in which you work. Any questions?
I just wanted to ask, I'm from Flinders Island, I don't live there at the moment, but in your discussions about remote communities, one of the challenges that I've found there in the past is that there are very few medical professionals and there's usually one doctor. So if you do go to that doctor and...
everyone knows.
Well, everyone knows them, and also if you happen to get a doctor who says, yeah, you're just a bit sad because your grandfather died, see you later, that's it. There isn't anyone else in the medical professional to see, and that coupled with, I think in probably lots of parts of Tasmania, high levels of illiteracy. Yes. So a lot of your online resources are going to be difficult, because even if you kind of got the combination of being older and not necessarily computer savvy, or being younger and being illiterate. Yeah. I'm just curious about how you're tackling some of those issues in the communities where your online platform, they may not be ready for that or able to access that, and there aren't the people around either.
Yeah, look, it's a big issue, and I come from a remote community in the bush, and certainly with adult learning and literacy, I've seen that firsthand in many communities. If you look me up on LinkedIn or something like that, you'll see I've got qualifications coming out of my ears, but as a child, I'd be the person sitting at the kitchen table filling out the forms for my parents, encouraging them to go to, ask the supervisor for this form, or tell them that that you're busy, you can't fill it out now, and bring it home and you'll take it back tomorrow. So certainly from the kitchen tables that I've been around, I've seen the challenge. That's why I said a number of times during this presentation, we always aim for grade 7 English. Simple, easy, practical, and a lot of them are audio webinars, so you don't need high levels of learning around reading or writing, those sorts of things. So it's providing information. It's not, how can I put it? I probably work with people that want to help people learn, rather than academics or clinicians or researchers that like to prove to people that they're smart, and that's a big difference. So they approach it with, how can we make this easy and simple and easily understood? So the Beyond Blue program has a lot of drop-down menus and those sorts of things that are easily selected, so it helps you fill out the plan, it prompts you with those sorts of things. For rural communities or remote communities that, like you've had, what you need to do is be able to lobby for greater support for those communities. You park your car out the front of the doctor's surgery. As you walk down the shops, people are going to be saying, I saw your car at the doctor's surgery, what's going on? Who's crook, who's struggling, all the rest of it. That's the community that I grew up in. And a lot of the times we'd have people in our community that would go missing for 4 months or 6 months. Jill or Jack or John or Joan have had what we used to describe a touch of the nerves. So they've had to go somewhere for treatment, and no one ever knew what it was. No one ever knew what the issue was. Their re-entry strategy back into the community was always a struggle for those people, and there was always a cloud over, Jack or Jill or Joan or John, as to what their condition was, where they'd been for the last 6 months, and had they got over the touch of the nerves. And my view would be, as a community, you've really got to find solutions to that and start to lobby for high levels of support, or create a trapdoor for people to seek the help that they need as close as they can, and provide that level of support, particularly when they come back into the community, that they'll be respected, trusted and supported as they go through that next wave of change, because they need to know in the communities in which they live that the support's there if they relapse or struggle during that sort of, as they come back to the community. But yeah, it's a big challenge. And I think the key to it is, as a community, squarely put the issue on the table, and as a community try and work through it as best you can, reaching out for the support that you can from government departments, Department of Health and other support that you find throughout the community and throughout Tasmania, or even beyond. Any other questions? Yes, over to you.
Yeah, I come from an engineering and safety background, and
What industry sector, mate?
in cane foods at the moment, so
Oh, yeah.
into the rural. But yeah, in the past I've quite often reeled out figures like 25 people somewhere in today will be injured serious enough beyond workers' comp in Tasmania, and I'm quite often use that figure, but I'm staggered by every 4 hours in Australia, basically someone's going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
My question is, how many nationally, like in the rural and in Tasmania, do we have those sort of figures available?
Yeah, we have community numbers across different sectors, different age groups, those sorts of things. There was research published in 2013. It takes a number of years to actually gather the research, so the latest research was from 2014, published last year, and the shocking statistic is that suicide in Australia is at its highest it's ever been, even though as a broader community, we're putting more awareness, more programs, more care into our community. It was quite a shocking set of statistics that arrive, and I could certainly provide a link to Pam to incorporate that into this material. But we've got to get beyond numbers. What you're saying is exactly right, and I've worked in the health and safety field in mining, oil and gas utilities for a long time, and I've moved away from, still work with physical injury, but more towards psychological injury over the last 15 years. And we've got a long way to go as a community. And the reason I enjoy working with Tasmanians and coming to Tasmania is you're making greater inroads in collaborating and sharing information, in providing that level of community support that those that feel that they live on the mainland could actually learn from. But part of that challenge is getting people to work together and getting people to provide that level of insight, learning and sharing. And we've still got a long way to go in that sphere to actually take these messages and translate it into practical information on the job. So like you, I lament the statistics. We just need to do more, and we need to do it sooner. So thank you for your comment. It's not easy to look at those statistics, statistics that most people in the community would not be aware of. So working together, I think we push ahead and try and find solutions. Any last questions? Well, I encourage you to catch up with John and Rhonda, myself, during any of the breaks. If we can provide support, you've got good community networks within Tasmania, you've got good resources within Tasmania, and I'm more than happy to help where I can. So thank you for today. For those at home, in their workplace or in their ute watching this webinar, if we can be of any support or any greater support to this community, we'd be more than happy to. Thank you, Peb. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Stephen.